Hey there, Enthusiacs, and welcome back to Hero Talk. I am your host, I am the law, I am Judge Greg. On this episode, I'm sitting down with BaronFang, host of the Point Streak podcast, as we discuss Thor: The Dark World. Today we are going to talk Thor: The Dark World. Now, if you have not seen Thor: The Dark World, we are going to spoil this movie. We are going to spoil this. The Avengers is open. The first Thor is open. The first Captain America. Any movie that has been released in the Marvel Universe up to this point is fair game.
You've been warned that anything is fair game.
All right, because otherwise I have to worry about what I say, and I don't want to do it. So, Thor: The Dark World, directed by Alan Taylor, who's not really the kind of guy who brings a whole lot to the movie just because of his name. But it was directed by Alan Taylor, starring Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, and Tom Hiddleston once again revising his much-loved role as Loki, the god of mischief.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, you saw Thor: The Dark World, correct?
I did, yes. Just in the last week and a half or so, I caught it. Though I've got an interesting perspective because while I have seen the other, what do we want to call them? Avengers or Marvel Universe type films to date?
They call it the cinematic universe, maybe? I don't know. Let's just refer to them what they are, is the Avengers commercials.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I've seen all those, but I did not actually see the original Thor. Now, I feel like I have because I can infer so much from the other films, Avengers in particular, about Loki. But I didn't actually see the the first one, and it's interesting that I managed to enjoy it as much as I did with what should have been some rather large blind spots.
Yeah. So did you ever, at any point when you're watching The Dark World, did you ever think to yourself, I don't know who this person is or what they're doing here or why I should care?
You know what? Not really. There was a couple of times. Look, I should say from the outset, even though I read some Marvel titles, I don't read enough about what's connected to Thor to know a lot of these characters well. I mean, I know who Odin is, and I know who Loki is and Thor is from mythology. So yeah, that's easy enough to figure out who's related to who. I didn't get who Idris Elba's character was, but I didn't feel like I couldn't understand that he was on the side of right. The one character that I was a bit confused about was the female warrior, because I gather there's some ongoing, hey, you should be marrying her, not this human woman thread line running from the first film.
That's the Lady Sif, as you're referring to, played by the lovely Jamie Alexander.
Exactly.
And she's phenomenal. She was one of the names thrown around for Wonder Woman, who I think might have been a better choice than who they picked, but that's a whole different podcast right there. But in terms of that whole that triangle between her and Thor is what you saw in the Dark World. It's about the same amount of time and effort they gave it in the regular Thor. It's oh, look at her. Yep, look at her. And then she's looking at Thor. And then Thor's taking his shirt off, and quite frankly, I'm looking at Thor that way when he's taking his shirt off. But that's about it. They never got into that too much. And for those listening, Idris Elba plays Heimdall, who's the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge, known as the Bifrost, which is how people get from the Thor world. What is it called? Asgard.
Asgard to Midgard.
Midgard being Earth.
Right.
I can just imagine there for a second, people were screaming into their MP3 players this guy doesn't even know what Asgard's called. Sorry.
And yeah, there might have been a few other ones here and there that I was a bit confused about, but and I knew who the insane Stellan Skarsgård doctor character was from the Avengers.
Dr.
Enough to understand that he was tuned into this multiple worlds thing that was going to be talked about. Honestly, I thought I would have expected to have been a lot more confused for someone who had not seen the first one, but it really didn't hold me back that much. I didn't find myself confused much at all, really.
Well, that's good. I would have, I guess I would have thought you would be, but then as I'm thinking back to the movie, it was pretty decent as far as the first movie. I hate to say this because I did enjoy it, but basically nothing happens. Like Thor gets sent down to Earth as a human over the course of about a long weekend, and during that long weekend, he falls in love with a girl. He learns humility. He comes back, and then he gets in a big fight with Loki. And at the end of it, he destroys the Bifrost, the bridge, which apparently was not that hard to fix because
it's back.
It's back now. It's like 2 years later they fixed it, but he still hasn't gone back to Earth or done any other stuff or gone to see Jane again. And like he shot down for the Avengers, and he's like, "Well, I couldn't talk to you because
I was busy in
New York."
Yeah, I love that line.
but then I think about the end of the Avengers when they're all like sitting in that restaurant, like eating shawarma or whatever. What is shawarma? Is that right?
I thought it was. Honestly, I thought it was a gyros or something like that. But I could, or gyros, or however the hell you say it. But I could be wrong.
I was assuming it was shawarma because like Tony Stark said something like, "I really want shawarma." So they all went there, which I thought was funny because I'm also pretty sure Captain America got shot in there sometime. It seems like he'd be like, "Guys, this is cute and all, but like I got shot in the chest. I would love to go to a hospital right now."
Super soldier and all, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, he's shot, and then Thor's all like, "Well, I had time to, get takeout. I couldn't drop you a line because I had to, and then I couldn't travel back and forth, even though Odin used his magical MacGuffin powers to let me travel for the sake of this movie."
Yeah.
But their true story is like, we didn't have the budget for you in the Avengers movie.
Yeah.
So
exactly, yeah.
None of you people get to show up. No. One thing that I noticed, and you might have a different perspective on this, but like when you have Dr. Selvig and like Kat Dennings played Darcy, who was Jane Foster's assistant, like it really felt like they had nothing for these people to do.
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing about Darcy's character bringing her to the singularity or whatever you want to call it, where all the gravity wasn't working right. That seemed to be really her main point in the film, was to bring her to that area where like physics was breaking down or whatever. And other than that, it was comic relief, really, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in the first movie, like when Thor is alone and he is a human again, and you don't have all these other people around him, like his other Thor buddies, then it makes sense that you need to have humans to round out the cast, because it can't just be, Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman the whole movie. But in this movie, where like the other warriors are there and Jane comes back, you don't need these people anymore. They aren't adding anything, and I felt they got a ton of screen time for not really doing much other than, running around and calling Mjolnir Mew Mew once, because that was apparently funny.
Yeah. And then the assistant's assistant gag, which got old
incredibly fast.
And I don't recognize that guy from anywhere, so I didn't even have recognition of saying, "Oh, he's funny. I know him from somewhere." So
yeah, no, I know, just like he was just so out of place, and you're like, is that all that we're going to get as a payoff for this?
Yeah,
like just this running gag that get it? I'm the assistant, but I have an assistant. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, and they're not getting paid and all that jazz.
Yeah.
It just felt like they were padding it out a little bit, and given it was 112 minutes, they probably could have cut that 5 to 7 minutes out, and I wouldn't have missed it, to be perfectly honest.
Although somebody who did get a real short cameo, and it's always nice to see him getting work, is Chris O'Dowd.
Yes, I like that a lot.
Yeah, from the IT Crowd.
Yeah,
he's got some other super popular show he's on, and I feel bad that I don't know him for that. I always call him the IT Crowd guy.
Yeah, I just saw a DVD cover of it the other day, and of course, other members of the audience would remember him from the Bridesmaids.
Bridesmaids, he played Bridesmaids.
Yeah, I want to say, isn't he on one of those Netflix original shows? Have I got that right?
The only Netflix original show I've ever seen is the fourth season of Arrested Development.
Oh, okay, maybe I've got that wrong, but
he might be. I don't.
You're right though. There's something we're forgetting that he's.
It's a very big, like, with him, and he was like from South Africa, and he managed the singing group. And I remember it caused a really big hullabaloo when they put him like front and center on the cover, and not the singers.
Oh, that was the Sapphires. That was an Australian film. That was an Australian film about these 4 girls, Aboriginal girls, that they basically do a Motown group effectively with him kind of keyboards and managing them. And I'm not sure if it's Vietnam era, but yeah, no, I remember him being on the cover, even though he's meant to be a supporting.
Right. And that bothered some people, but anyway, it was, as I said, he was probably one of the highlights of the movie for me because he's just funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he makes the IT crowd, quite frankly.
Yeah, if you've got a scene where you need it to be awkwardly funny, like they needed for that scene,
he's the guy.
He's the guy, yeah. Natalie Portman doesn't do. I don't think I've seen her do romantic rom-com stuff too effectively well. So he was definitely carrying the load in those date scenes.
I did not like Natalie Portman in this one. I didn't like her in the first one. I think she's wooden, and I'm gonna say it. All right, this needs to be out there. I don't get all the Natalie Portman love. I just don't get it.
I like her in some stuff, but the more sort of normal and grounded her characters are, the less interesting I find her. Like when she's losing her mind in Black Swan or something like that, I can get it. But when she's just playing, an average woman or something, and I mean, she's obviously not an average person in this film. She's like the doctor of super space or whatever she does.
She's figured out interdimensional portals. In about the amount of time it takes me to figure out how to program the VCR. Yeah, I said VCR. I'm old.
Yeah. But any movie in which she's just playing an average person in their day-to-day life, I tend to agree with you. She doesn't do much for me, to be honest. Clearly she's in this film for name recognition. Someone to pair up with Chris Hemsworth, and who's now has enough name recognition on his own, obviously. But
good for
they
him.
need it.
Good for him. I remember when Chris Hemsworth was just the Who, the guy who played Kirk's dad at the beginning of the new Star Trek film, and that was it. That's how you had to explain him to people.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for him. And Tom Hiddleston, I gotta say, he kills it as Loki in every scene he's in.
He does. I hear a lot about Tom Hiddleston, like almost to a sickening amount, because he's just so well loved, as is Chris Eccleston, who we'll get to in a bit. But
that's another bullet point on my little list here. Yeah.
But look, if you and I don't know about you, but I don't know anything else that I haven't seen anything else that he's in. I know that he's in some big made-for-TV Shakespeare thing that they did years ago on British TV, and I know that I'm probably forgetting a bunch of other important stuff that he's done. But if this is the role that made him, then I don't blame people for liking him, because he's great in it. I mean, he was great in the Avengers, but he just turns it up a notch here. Every scene the scene where he's just kind of watching as the berserker.
No, not see, now you're putting me on it's the weird, crazy dark dwarf. Guy.
He's watching him clean up, and then at one point the dwarf sees him behind the thing, and I think just calculates that, well, there's no point. There's no point getting into a fight here. He's in his cage anyway, and very little is said beyond, you might want to take the stairs on the left.
Yep.
But and even though he's playing across what I think is a CGI possibly character in that bit, or at least partly CGI, it's pretty effective.
Right. Just for the people who are now yelling at their iPods, we just want to point out that character is Algrim, and he's a dark elf, not a dwarf. So,
did you say dwarf?
I think we both said dwarf. So he's a dark elf.
Oh,
he's not a dwarf. Please do not write us hate mail.
But yeah, no, he's in a couple other scenes, one-on-one with some other people, and I mean, he steals every scene he's in. He's bitter where he needs to be bitter. He's nasty and snide where he needs to be nasty and snide, and and it also provides some comic relief, and manages to get a cameo for Cap America in there for about 5 seconds, just thrown in for the hell of it.
That's right. in the deleted scenes, I think they actually did film that once with Tom Hiddleston, and I don't know if there was of Chris Evans. They didn't know if he was going to show up, so there is a scene with him all dudded up as Captain America.
Oh, you're kidding me. That's awesome.
So that's maybe a reason to buy the Blu-ray. But then I guess they found out Chris Evans was there, and they're like, well, we gotta use him now.
That's awesome. That's cool.
But
That would be worth seeing for sure.
yeah, but it's at least a good thing to see. I don't know if they just recorded it and then they could get Chris Evans, or if they recorded it so that Thor had someone to play off of, or or so that like Chris Evans had a performance of Loki doing it, so then he knew like the intonation to use. Because I've seen that done before, like where you have like a person who is like being controlled by another character, so they have like the guy play the lines like he would, and then you copy his performance.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
very famously phenomenal episode of the Justice League cartoon where they did that with they had Flash and Lex Luthor switch brains. So to
Oh,
record it, they brought both actors in together, and so they would have like the one guy read the line like in the Flash, and then Lex Luthor would like repeat the line with the same intonation that the Flash would use, so it would actually be like the Flash was talking. Which worked really well in that episode. Is one of my favorite episodes of that show for that reason, because it just comes across like it feels like they're, they're in each other's bodies. They're talking that way. It was very well done.
hmm.
So you brought him up. So let's talk about the absolute waste of Chris Eccleston in this movie.
Yeah. Well, to start, I'll say, as far as the character is concerned, again, I don't know a lot about I don't know a lot about the Thor mythos. I don't even know if the whole dark elf thing is based on real mythology or not, or whether Malekith is a character that's adapted from comics or mythology, or both.
As
But
far as I know, Malekith is purely a comic book character. I don't think he's actually has anything to do with.
yeah.
Oh, okay, no, I stand corrected, as I have just looked that up so that people don't again yell at me on their iPods. The Black Elves, they
Yeah.
are a part of Norse mythology, so
Okay.
there is some basis there, but I
Yeah.
don't believe Malekith has any actual Norse equivalent. He's just
Okay.
kind of the made up character to lead these other guys that they pulled from Norse mythology for the comics.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I mean, I didn't go into this film. I mean, geez. I mean, okay. I knew that Loki was the villain in the first movie.
Right.
If you had asked me who's the obvious, villain for the second Thor movie, I would have been like, I don't know. So I didn't have any like,
Yeah,
I didn't.
he's forgettable.
Yeah,
And
I didn't have any fondness for this character.
yeah,
I have fondness for Chris Eccleston, but
right. I mean,
it felt like a bit of a waste.
Chris Eccleston is entertaining. He's energetic. He's got charisma. He's got just about everything you would want in a character who's not quietly brooding and speaking entirely in a made-up elven language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look, you've got a nerd sort of gasm type casting situation where
Don't
you've
ever
got
say that again. Let's just make that clear.
you've,
We don't say
you've
that.
got you've got Doctor Who, and you've got the much loved Tom Hiddleston in the same movie together. And do they even have a scene where they're in the
I
same space for more than a few
I don't.
seconds at a
Oh, I'm
time?
trying to think if they even like shared the screen at any point. Like, because I all I know is like Loki and oh, this guy's name again, Algrim,
Algrim.
or I think he was called Curse when he was like the big giant evil guy.
Mm.
But Algrim, like they had a lot of scenes together and they played off each other quite a bit. But I don't actually think he's got any scenes with Chris Eccleston.
Yeah, there was a battle, the brief battle where Loki dies, quote unquote, in the
Yeah.
whatever that world was called, dark, not the dark world.
We'll just call it the Dark World.
The
He was in
Dark
the Dark World.
sure.
Because that's when they took the secret portal to like leave Asgard. It very happened to take them to exactly the place they needed to be, which is where Jane was, which
Yeah,
was convenient.
and then they trick him and all that stuff. So yeah, but certainly they didn't have any. They didn't,
They didn't play off each other the way they could
no,
have, the way
no.
any competent scriptwriter would have wanted them to do.
Yeah. And again, I don't know whether Malekith was supposed to be played flat and dark and in a different light. Like, maybe that is accurate for the comment. But if that's comic, but if that's the case, why waste, as you said, a guy like Chris Eccleston who could light up the screen doing a more. I mean, I've seen Chris Eccleston play a conniving villain in Elizabeth, and he wasn't over the top. But he stole, when he was on screen, he was, a big screen villain. And Malekith feels more like just angry for the sake of angry and even though it's meant to be this, eons long grudge or whatever it is, there's really very little time to let that breathe.
Yeah, well,
in
we
the
don't we
movie.
don't really see the grudge though. Like we have two different sections of exposition telling us that there's this age-old grudge, but we never see
Mm,
it. They're like, no, it's he hates us because of this book.
yeah,
Like, I'm going to tell you why he hates us, and
yeah,
you sit there as an audience member, you're like, why can't you just show me?
yeah.
Like, I don't want to be told. I mean, he's good at it. Like, I'm going to point out, terrible movie. He was great in it. G.I. Joe: Rise of Cobra.
As Destro,
He was
yeah,
Destro,
yeah.
and I think he was. Listen, there was not a lot of bright points in that movie. It was basically him and Brendan Fraser's cameo, and the rest of it was unwatchable crap.
I didn't even know about that cameo. I might have to go back and check that
Yeah, it
one
was in
out.
there was this training montage where Duke, played by Channing Tatum, grown, is training with Snake Eyes, played by Ray Parks, which is good casting but had weird costume. But anyway, so there's this training montage where they're training together, and
Mm.
like Brendan Fraser just walks in as they called him Lieutenant Stone, just some random GI Joe to be like, "Hey, let's watch this." And he's like, during the whole fight, he's like, "Oh, that's gonna hurt," and then he leaves, and that's his only scene in the movie.
Yeah. But yeah, no, for the most part, I tend to agree with you with Chris Eccleston. I mean, I don't even know who, you could have picked a no name really for the character.
Given all he was gonna do, like just this crazy action set piece, which is what we're gonna get to next, and saying some stuff which is dubbed, so it doesn't matter what he's saying or what his intonation is because we're not paying attention to how he's saying it. We're trying to read the bottom of the screen. There's a reason in Star Trek everyone just speaks English. We
Yeah.
understand it's not realistic. I want to be able to appreciate the performance, not read the bottom of the screen and completely ignore what he's doing or saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so let's talk about this fight. Like the centerpiece of the movie. It seemed to take a long time. And bear in mind, I've seen Man of Steel, so I know a thing or two about long, drawn-out battle sequences between superheroes.
Yeah.
And this one seemed like they were taking a long time, except very unrealistically causing significantly less damage than Superman did.
Yeah, and a lot of the way that it was shot with close-ups at weird times and stuff made it harder to follow. Plus, a lot of like swirling dark and light and all that
Yeah, and
didn't
they're
help
falling
matters.
in and out of like they're going like between different worlds, and I think they showed up in like the frozen giant land for a while, and you're just
Yeah,
it's like I don't know what's going on, or if their fight is even accomplishing anything, much like in Man
yeah,
of Steel.
yeah, yeah. Uh, but you're right. I mean, it was building to that point, so I guess they felt that they had to draw it out for 5 to 10 minutes or whatever it ended up being.
Yeah,
And then intersperse it with frigging comic relief, of course,
that's
which
it
they
was
couldn't help.
it was horribly painful, and you're watching, and you're like, I don't even understand why they're fighting. Like, when Thor fights Loki, there was something there, and I'm talking at the end of the first one where there was this fight between them. First of all, it was short.
Yeah.
And there was a given purpose for what they were fighting for. And this one, like, I kind of got lost, and it seems like Thor is just being the distraction, while like the supporting characters turn their sensors into things that can harness
Yeah.
portals. Which, listen, I guess I'm not a scientist, but I don't think that's how it works. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to change the subject, but I was and again, not having seen the first one, maybe I didn't get this, but I was surprised how much fighter combat there was in this movie. Like, was that new from the first one?
What do you mean by fighter combat?
Like when the Dark Elves first attacked
Oh, like
Asgard,
with like all their spaceships and stuff,
and they came in these
and
spaceships, and it turned into like cannons and
yeah, there was
and fighters.
no, there was not a lot of that in the like as in the first movie. Like most of the fighting takes place either on the frozen ice world with
Right.
Thor and Sif and the Warriors 3, and then on Earth with Thor and Sif and the Warriors 3, and then Thor and Loki on the Bifrost. So there was none of that. It was all just those characters fighting. And then this movie you get a whole lot of like Star Wars sequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Warriors 3 stuff got cut down quite a bit, I gather, because at the start of them, that was one thing I did feel.
Yeah.
One thing I forgot to mention I felt a little out of touch on was Thor and all his friend warriors that were helping him mop up, so to speak. they did appear later in the film, the one guy with the rapier and the vaguely Japanese looking guy, but not a lot of screen time compared to our Earth friends.
Yeah. Now I feel bad because like I honestly, and like maybe this does not make me quite suited to talk about a Thor movie, but I know they're the Warriors 3. I can't tell them apart. I don't know. I'm looking at a cheat sheet right now, and there's Fandral, and I think he's like the Robin Hood Errol Flynn guy, and Volstagg I think was the big fat guy.
Yeah.
Who's not that fat, but I think he's fatter in the comic books. And then Hogun is the Asian guy. I don't know a better way to say that, and I apologize. Sif obviously stands out from the group because first of all she actually has a character in this movie that has motivation, and these other guys are just like their character is we're Thor's friends and we like to fight.
Yeah,
that's their collective character, and other than maybe Volstagg likes to eat too.
Yeah,
but
I gather that Rene Russo returned from the first one too.
Yeah,
right?
she was in the first one. I saw the first one very recently, and she didn't really have a great big part in that one either. So I think probably best if you can't think of anything for her to do, just kill her off. This is what they do. I said spoilers.
Yeah. Although it's interesting, like if Phrygia can die, why isn't Loki dead?
Because Loki's not dead, folks. In fact,
yeah, another spoiler. Yeah. But I mean, he did look mortally wounded to me.
Sure,
at least
dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe they will explain that in the next one. But they and granted, I saw the Avengers in which the setup to the whole he would control people was determined by a stick that you poke people with. So I realized that attaching a lot of common sense to this perhaps doesn't make much sense. But if she can die by, I mean, how did she got killed by? She basically got killed by
Ulgrim. No, right. Not Ulgrim. I think Malekith killed her.
Yeah.
So, it had to have been Ulgrim because otherwise Loki wouldn't have been all mad at Ulgrim.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not remembering that exactly in my head because very few scenes in this movie were memorable.
Yeah. Actually, that makes me that makes me remember one of my favorite Loki scenes in the movie where Thor goes to pay his respects after the mother's dead, and you see him sitting there in what appears to be his cell, just kind of calm and smug.
Yeah.
And then after about a minute says, you can stop pretending. And then the illusion switches off and you see his whole cell has been just absolutely wrecked. And he's in like rags and clearly been like battering the walls out of frustration. That was kind of a nice.
That was a very nice touch. It just goes to show they spend more time building up Loki and his character than Thor. This movie might as well have been called Loki: The Dark World.
They do. And it's clear that whatever they're planning on doing in the third one, although it'd be a shame if they didn't do Thor 4, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Just for the name alone. But like based on the assumption that they will probably stop at 4.
Everyone's got their own different number of movies they're signed on for, so it's weird like that.
Yeah,
so
and
I don't know right off the top of my head what Chris Hemsworth has, but I know if it's like I think Chris Evans has 5 movies that he's got to do.
Yeah.
So maybe
including Avengers 2, I assume.
Right. So I think so the name is failing me. Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is considered number 3. So everyone's assuming that then there's going to be like another Captain America and maybe Avengers 2 or like maybe just Avengers 2 and Avengers 3. But I think he does the 5 and then he's planning on cutting and running. I don't think he wants to do any more.
Right. And as for Iron Man, I mean, at this point, if Bob Downey just shows up for the Avengers sequels, that'd probably be enough.
I think that's all he wants to do at this stage. I think he just wants to show up for the Avengers sequels. I don't know how many movies he has left on his. I'm fairly certain that because he is the guy who's run off with the most money because he had some rider in his contract that he would get a cut of all the movies that Iron Man is in.
No, okay. Well done.
Yeah, so good work because he's basically he was easily the highest paid guy on Avengers because that movie made all the money that's in the world.
Yeah, and then some.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this end with Loki and since we're spoiling everything, we can talk about this scene. So Loki, who we think is dead, got stabbed in the chest, if I'm remembering that scene correctly, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so got stabbed in the chest, much like his mother, who got stabbed in the chest but died, and we think Loki died. Then he shows up, and he's talking to Odin at one point, and everyone's like, oh, that is so Loki.
Yeah,
So we get to the
Yeah.
end, and you got Thor and Odin, and they're talking about God knows what. Thor goes away, and it turns out it was Loki the whole time. So what happened to Odin?
Yeah. I don't know. Are they going to explain that? I wonder. I mean, Anthony Hopkins would probably happily not do another one if it was convenient. I mean, I'm assuming this is just a paycheck for him.
Yep.
In fact, I remember there being like a lot of uncertainty if he was going to be back for this one because much like Connery, he has said like I'm done a few times,
Yeah.
to my memory. So, but I mean, you'd think they'd have to film something, of him doing the switcheroo or kicking him into another portal that he has never told anyone about and slamming the door shut. But it also begs the question: if Thor was able to see through Loki's illusions at other times, how is he going to sustain this?
Yeah.
Enough to build a film on, but I don't know. I guess it depends on if the next one is going to. If the next one does a 2-year jump, then I don't know how it's going to work.
Right. I think it makes for a nice little ending for your movie, but it's a weird jump. And then we have two stingers. One of which is basically just a giant commercial for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
Um, I know jack squat about the Guardians of the Galaxy. This whole thing is like, I don't know what this collector is. I know he's talking about the gems. I vaguely remember from my childhood the Infinity Gauntlet,
Yeah.
but that is the extent of my knowledge. I remember this thing, and Thanos wanted it, and he was at the end of the Avengers. So I think maybe they're finally going to pay off that teaser.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't know anything about that collector character, and I looked at a wikia earlier about how there was some argument about we shouldn't have two Infinity Stones in one place.
Right.
And I gather the Tesseract is
I think the
one of the
Tesseract
Infinity
is
Stones.
now. I don't know
No?
if this is the way it is in the actual comic book lore, because I don't really read comic books anymore, and I don't want to be like downgrading about that like they're beneath me. But I don't got time for that,
Yeah.
and I've never really read Marvel, and I don't know much about the Infinity Gems. But I think they're playing like the Tesseract is the gem of the soul, maybe the gem of the mind
Maybe.
control, because Loki was using it to control people's minds.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what the blue gem was, and they're saying that the Tesseract was that.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
but I don't know. I'm 90% talking out of my butt on this one.
Yeah. But anyway, the ether, I guess, has been handed over to
Yeah.
to this dude, and this is going to carry on into.
Yeah.
And I have no. I mean, I don't know. If you know little about Guardians of the Galaxy, I know even less than that.
I
So
know. I know basically it's Star-Lord, and then there's a raccoon, and there's a tree, and then
come on.
there's another big guy called Drax.
All right.
Like, I know next to nothing. It's it felt really arbitrary, but then I got to be honest, when I enjoy these comic book movies much more when I have absolutely no idea what the story is. So I can watch this thing and I don't have to walk out going like, they got Rocket Raccoon wrong. I don't
Yeah.
care. It's a raccoon. He was funny. I don't whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at this one as just it. On the one hand, it doesn't have a lot of draw,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, it's like it's kind of just a blank slate for them to.
Right. You can do whatever
it's-
once you don't have people who's too concerned about the story,
Yeah. But because Marvel has enough cachet behind it,
Yeah.
I think people are going to go. And even if they don't go for Avengers money, I think they'll still turn a profit on it. Like the guy they've got starring in it. I like him, but they'll be able to pay him a fraction of what they've paid these
From
other guys.
from Parks and Rec, right? What's his name?
Yeah.
Help me out.
I can't remember now.
Oh, I have to look it up because otherwise it's gonna drive all of the listeners nuts.
Yeah.
If I don't. Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt, yeah. Anyway, they're not going to have to pay him Bob Downey money for this movie.
No. I mean,
So-
this is his first like straight up starring role, right?
Yeah, so this will be a
far as
budget
I know.
Marvel movie. Well, as far as I'm aware, too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's
so-
been in a ton of movies, but he's always like the friend or the sidekick or some other guy. But
Yeah. So they don't need to.
oh no, it's not
Aim
his
for the
first starring movie. He was the
It's
lead
not?
in the Lego Movie.
All right.
He was that
Well,
counts.
and here I thought it was Dane Cook. No, that was Planes.
That was dumb. Anyway, and then the second stinger was Thor comes back. He kisses Jane Foster, and then
Yeah.
at that point I'm like, I can't believe I stayed in the theater to watch this. But then they at least show the ice monster chasing some birds, and I'm like, oh, he's
Yeah.
just like a dog.
They forgot about him.
He is all over London right now. Haha, he's probably killed people.
So yeah, I stayed around for that. Well, I stayed around because I was trapped in a plane and couldn't go anywhere. So that's
Exactly.
why I stayed. That's why I stayed around
I
for the
stuck
stingers.
around. I decided not to just jump out of the cockpit. That's
I
not
mean,
how planes work. I'm sorry.
I did it partially because it's just, I mean, everyone just assumes there's going to be a stinger on these Marvel films now, and I guess the only catch is that every once in a while, if I'm not mistaken, you don't necessarily get the same stinger as everyone else. I've heard that for some of these Marvel films, there's actually been more than one, and depending on where you've seen it, you might have seen a slightly a different one.
No,
So
I've heard that with like I think the Wolverine movies have done that, but I don't know if they've ever done that with like any of these like the Marvel Studios ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I've got that wrong then. But
Yeah.
yeah, it always worth staying behind the
Right.
credits for these, even if
It's-
they are very long credits.
It's funny because like the people who run the theaters hate this because they want to get it
Oh.
cleaned out for like the next
Oh,
films.
yeah.
And you got all of us are still sitting in our seats waiting, and I like it when you'll go in there and it's like it'll be either like The Dark Knight or Superman or one of these movies where like because DC doesn't put stuff at the end of their movies, and the guys come in, they're like, "There's nothing at the end.
Yeah.
Just go, please."
Just drop your popcorn ball and go, please.
So what was your favorite part? What was your favorite part of Thor: The Dark World?
Look, it would be easy to say, look, that Loki scene of him like showing he'd basically lost it is pretty high up there. Next to that was probably just seeing him palling around at the beginning there, which was when the stakes were a lot lower. But yeah, I like that stuff a lot, and it was before it got super heavy and confusing, so probably then. I any of the Earth stuff really grated on me, so I lean towards the Asgard bits when things were less messy.
Right. Well, it makes sense. You didn't come to Thor to see Earth.
No.
Reminds me of the Masters of the Universe movie from way back when, where like we're finally going to see a He-Man movie, and He-Man comes to Earth, and you're like, oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part has to be, you know what? It's going to be the dinner scene at the very beginning with Chris O'Dowd. He is funny. I think that was when I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. Oh, it's Chris O'Dowd, and then it was downhill straight from there.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part. And culminated to the low point of the movie when Kat Dennings calls Mjolnir Meow Mew again. Like, get it? Because she's dumb. Yeah, I get it, folks. All right, so if you had to score this movie on whatever scale, these scores don't matter. Pick whatever scale you want to score it. What would you give this movie?
Look, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10, and I say that, knowing full well that, yeah, probably requires some background to understand it. And for some, I find that a lot of people, and I'm kind of in this camp, feel that if a film doesn't stand on its own 2 feet, you should score it lower. But the fact is, these are a different sort of animal. They have to exist within this metaverse or whatever you want to call it. We'll get flack for that term. I'm sure I've misused that term. Yeah. They can't stand on their own any more than Empire Strikes Back, which is well loved. It could stand on its own. So if Empire Strikes Back can be the best movie ever made, and it requires coda on either side of it, then I can say that I really enjoyed this, having really no expectations other than expecting it to just expand upon what radiates out from the Avengers movie that I saw 6 to 8 months ago. And I find the casting was I found the casting was pretty good, even though I agree with you that Natalie Portman is probably not well suited. The more I look at the posters, the more I think they picked her because her head comes in at chin level on Chris Hemsworth, which is kind of visually correct for the Thor character. But beyond that, I can't think of why anyone thought she was the right choice. I think Hiddleston probably gives it a star or 2 on his own. And I say that as someone who's tired of all the I love Tom Hiddleston's talk, but I have to admit he really I will watch the next Thor movie purely to see what he brings to it, and if they don't try and incorporate him somewhere into the next Avengers movie, even if it's not in a major role, they're idiots because they need to make use of the tools they have.
He butters their bread.
Yeah.
All right. If I had to score this movie, and I'm going to be cute about it, I would give it 3 flying hammers out of 5.
All right.
It was competent. There was a script, and they read off the script, and the cameras seemed to be working well, and it looked like there was a reasonable CG team. Idris Elba is always good, even though he's so underutilized in these movies. Like, why do you get Idris Elba if he's just going to be that guy who stands at the door? Like,
yeah.
And Chris Eccleston is again. It was a lot of wasted opportunity. So I say this movie is just about average in every conceivable way. The people who really should be getting more screen time are not, and the people who should not are. Yeah. And so I would rather you take every single scene where Kat Dennings was in it, and you just cut them right out, and you give them to either Jamie Alexander or Chris Eccleston or Idris Elba. And I mean every scene that they're in, and then like cut Natalie Portman's role in half and give those scenes to Jamie Alexander. Because I would watch the Lady Sif movie, quite frankly. Because I think
when the Blu-ray comes out, maybe there can be a JudgeGreg cut where you do excise those, and maybe there are some deleted scenes that are that stuff that you're looking for. I mean, you never know. I mean,
I suppose
I wouldn't be surprised. And yeah, I mean, as for Lady Sif, do you reckon they could do three? What are they called again? The Three Warriors.
Warriors 3.
Do you reckon they could do a Warriors 3 movie?
No, I see these guys being like on a short that comes with like Captain America Winter Soldier Blu-ray. Unfortunately, I mean the Lady Sif, she did show up in the Shield TV show. So apparently people love that. I don't watch that show because I just don't. Listen, I don't have time. But
yeah,
I mean apparently she showed up in that, and it was pretty cool. I mean, I like Jamie Alexander. I like Lady Sif. I really thought she should have been Wonder Woman. I mean, I know people don't like to cross-pollinate between the different like movie studios, but I think she killed it as Sif. I think she's wasted as Sif, and I think she deserves better. And yeah, I just don't think I would love to watch these guys in their own movie, but yeah, there'll be a short that comes with Captain America.
Yeah, well, that might not be a bad idea, really. Yeah, a little bonus extra.
Yeah, why not? All right. Well, I mean, we got much more conversation out of this movie than I thought we would, given that this movie was quite unremarkable. But maybe that gives you more to talk about. When it's a good movie, you can't just sit there and be like, oh, yeah, I thought that was great, too. Yeah, remember this part? Yeah, that was great. But anyway, hey, that's Hero Talk, everybody. Hey, thanks, everyone, for listening, and we hope to see you right back here for the next Hero Talk.